When we speak about this topic, theoretical approaches to childhood, we are assumed to already know the social constructionist approach to childhood. Like I said, the idea that childhood is more of a social construct than a natural phenomenon. Now, taking this ahead, there are broadly six different approaches that I'd like to discuss today. And the first approach to childhood, or the first perspective to childhood, or for the first school of thought, right? So we're done with one, we're doing six more here. And the first one that we'll be discussing today is referred to as the March of Progress, which is also referred to as the conventional approach, followed by the New Right approach. We'd then move on and discuss the social conflict approach. The fourth one for today would be the feminist approach to childhood. The fifth one would be the interactionist approach to childhood. And the sixth one would be the postmodernist approach to childhood. So, to begin with, as we speak about the March of Progress approach or the conventional approach, as we speak about this March of Progress approach or the conventional approach, this approach pretty much is in line with the basic idea that the functionist or the New Right perspective uh, refers to, or the functions of the New Right thinkers they tend to subscribe to. Now, what about the March of Progress approach or the conventional childhood approach? As we use the word the conventional childhood approach, this approach highlights the role of parenting and suggests that primary socialization is the key to a successful and happy childhood. So, as we speak about the conventional approach, the idea over here is that parenting plays quite a significant role. Parenting plays rather the most important role. And according to this conventional approach, primary socialization is a key to a successful and happy childhood. So, our focus over here is on primary socialization of children. Now, taking this a little further from here, according to the conventional approach, if there is successful parenting, this would result in the child having social values, the child working hard, the child demonstrating respect to others, and always having good manners. According to this conventional approach, good parents from this perspective should exercise sensible control and discipline over the child's behavior and seek to ensure that the negative outside influences do not undermine their children's upbringing, and that children are kept safe from threats to their innocence. So the idea over here is to instill positive social values in a child. It is assumed that it is the parents' responsibility to exercise sensible control over their children and to keep their children safe from the external threats of the society, from the harsh realities of the world, to be able to maintain their innocence. Now, this particular approach, as I mentioned right at the beginning, is sometimes referred to as the March of Progress approach as well. Now, why is it that we use the word March of Progress over here? When we use the word March of Progress, the idea is that this idea of March of Progress, I just write it down over here. This idea of March of Progress over here is considered to be a feature of contemporary society. This is considered to be a feature of contemporary society, or contemporary life, based on the idea that there's been an improvement on how, based on the idea that things are improved as compared to the past. Now, this march of progress approach to childhood, this has to do with how children today live a steadily improved life. This improvement could be in terms of social improvement, economic improvement, as well as legal improvement. If you remember, we had spoken about Philip Aries, who had written the book Centuries of Childhood in the year 1962. Or, for the matter of fact, we could talk about Edward Shorter as well in the 1970s. They argue that childhood today is better than in the past with greater protection, education, healthcare, and rights. So, you could, if you want, use the references of Philip Aries in 1962 or Edward Shorter in 1970s, being more specific, 1976. But then again, you can use these references if you want to provide support for the points that you're making. You do not necessarily have to learn and have to use these names over here. So taking this ahead, as we speak about this conventional approach to childhood, or the march of progress approach to childhood, it assumes that childhood has progressed today from a state in which children were at great risk and threat from neglected parents, adult predators, and an indifferent state to a society in which parents and the state are united in the goal of turning the period of childhood into a positive, safe, happy, and healthy phase of social development. Hence the term march of progress, hence the term conventional approach to childhood. Now, having said that, the conventional approach to childhood has always assumed that successful child rearing requires two parents. Now, this is the point that we've discussed already. And according to the conventional approach to childhood, they believe that successful child rearing requires two parents of the opposite sex, and that there's a right way to bring up childhood. So, there should be two parents of opposite sex, and there's always a right way to nurture a child, or there's a right way to upbring a child. And this, consequently, they tend to see the experience of childhood as being potentially undermined by what they call deviant family units, such as single parent families or gay families. So, when we talk about the conventional approach to childhood, advocating there being two parents of opposite sex, they're automatically nullifying the idea that single parenthood could result in the correct upbringing of a child. So, taking this ahead, according to the conventional approach to childhood, they argue that working mothers are denying their children qualitative family interaction because they're too busy working. And this may be the cause of what the conventional approach sees as the decline of civilized childhood, in which children always respected their elders. So, the in a nutshell, if we talk about the conventional approach or the march of progress approach, these are the points that our discussion today revolved around. Now, moving on to the second approach that we have over here, that is the new right approach to childhood. Now, as we speak about the new right approach to childhood, if you remember, I mean, you should remember the new right approach to family as well. And the new right approach to family, they believe that the state policies or the government policies today are putting the family under threat, because they believe that the government should have a stricter role to play when it comes to deciding what particular family types should be allowed, what particular family types should not be allowed. And if you remember, the New Right perspective generally advocated how nuclear families are the best family form, and they were strictly against the idea of family diversity. So, having said that, if I take this a little further from here, according to the New Right approach, family life is seen as under threat from the state and government policies. So, they believe it's the state's negligence, it's the government policies that have resulted in family life being attacked today. Now, if I take this a little further, if we talk about Milleen Phillips in the year 1997, so Phillips in the year 1997 is typical of this new right approach to childhood. She argues that parenting has been undermined by state policies, which she claims have given too many rights and powers to children. So, according to Melene Phillips, she believes that there have been too many rights and powers that have been given to children today. So, parenting has been undermined by state policies. She is against, she is against She's against the rights and power and powers given to children, where she believes that parents today in this contemporary society, they're often seen to be penalized for resorting to what she argues are necessary sanctions. Now, if you uh, understand what she's trying to explain over here is that necessary punishments or necessary sanctions or necessary penalizing which parents used to use as a way, as a mechanism through which they could socialize their child, today it has not only been penalized, but in many parts of the developed world they are seen as they can be legal action that could be taken against the parents if they're involved in this. So Phillips believes that the media and the peer groups have become more influential today than the parents, which again she does not like. She sees the media in the form of magazines that have aimed at young girls, pop music, videos, and television as a particular problem because she believes that they encourage young girls to envisage themselves as sexual beings at a very younger age. Now, we need to understand one more thing. Melene Phillips came up with this idea in 1997. If I talk about 1997, we're going back to 97, 2007, 2017 and a couple of more. So we're talking about something that was put forward 25 plus years ago when perhaps television and televisions, magazines, and the media, the traditional media back then was very popular. So according to this, according to Phillips, these trends mean that the period of childhood has been shortened today. It is no longer a sacred and innocent period lasting to up to 13 to 14 years. So, according to Phillips, childhood is no longer seen as an innocent period that would last up to 13 to 14 years. And she blames the peer group for this, she blames the media for this. Phillips complains that adulthood and particularly the sexualization of childhood encroaches upon the experience of children a great deal earlier compared with the past. Now, as we use the word sexualization of children, what does this mean? When we use the word sexualization of children, the idea is that children are growing up too quickly because the media are introducing them to adult themes such as sex far too early in their development. So she's against the idea. She blames the media for sexualizing, rather sexualization, for sexualization of childhood. And she believes children are growing up too quickly because the media is introducing them to adult themes. Now, according to Phillips, many children do not have the emotional maturity to cope up with the rights and choices that they have today. This particular point, which has consequently resulted in an increase leading to social problems. All of this, according to her, is leading to social problems. And what sort of social problems are we talking about? We're talking about eating disorders, We're talking about self harm to the point that many children end up committing suicide, problems such as depression, or we could say drugs, or for the matter of fact, teenage pregnancies. Now, taking this ahead, pretty much in line with Phillips, if we speak about Postman, Neil Postman in the year 1994, Neil Postman in the year 1994, he saw childhood as under threat because television and the internet had resulted in social blurring. Now, Neil Postman is again pretty much in line with the idea that was advocated by Phillips in the year 1997. Before Phillips, Neil Postman in the year 1994 blamed the television, blamed the internet for for putting childhood under threat, and they believed it was the television and the internet that had resulted in social blurring. What does this word social blurring over here mean? The idea that the distinction between children and adults is beginning to disappear as children aspire to behave like adults and as adults treat children as their equals. So consumption of, if I now this was put forward in 1994, that is good about 31 years ago. But if I talk about, or if I relate to this to the contemporary society today, you've seen kids consuming media. And there's Netflix for children, there's YouTube for children, there are so many video games, there are so many I mean, I can recall, I can think of Roblox over here. These are today consumed by children, and a few clicks here and there, I'm sure everyone sitting here would agree, a few clicks here and there can take children to places that they shouldn't, could expose them to things that they shouldn't be exposed to in this young age. So Postman believes that there is no longer any distinction or boundaries between the world of adults and the world of children. Traditionally, he believed in order to protect children, these two worlds had been kept that had been kept separate in the sense that children back then were kept away from the harsh realities of the world. But because today, with the passage of time, because of technological advancement, there are so many children and the amount of exposure. Remember, minded, Postman came up with this idea in 1994. That is before you all were born. We're talking about something that was put forward, something that was said around 30 years ago. If you relate this, if you link this to how things are like today in this contemporary society, you'd see how Postman claimed or complained that the traditional children's games are now disappearing. And he believed that children are now playing the same computer games as adults. And as a consequence, he concluded that children are less childlike today. They speak, they dress, and they behave in more adult ways, which many adults, while at the same time, many adults are going through infantilization. Now, infantilization, what is infantilization? To reduce something to a childish state or condition. According to him, children are less like child today and adults are going through infantilization. You'd see adults being you'd see adults acting like children, dressing like children, which he believes is a social issue. Adults today are increasingly starting to dress more like their children and youth. Over time, nearly all the traditional features that mark the transition to adulthood, that is getting a job, religious confirmation, leaving home, getting married, are no longer apply in any clear way. The fact that children are spending longer living at home and are economically dependent on their parents for long periods compared with the past has compounded this problem. So this is an idea, this is a point that was made or that was put forward by Postman in the year 1994. However, if I quickly take you ahead and we speak about David Brooks in the year 2001. According to David Brooks, he diagnoses parents today as being obsessed with safety. So Postman's analysis has been criticized. According to David Brooks, it's not the way Postman is putting it. According to Postman, he believed that it according to Postman, he believed that it is the media that have created issues to the point of maybe no return. However, David Brooks in the year 2001, he recognizes or he feels that in contemporary society today, it's not that parents have left kids to be on their own. If anything, they're more concerned with defining boundaries for the kids. They're widening the control, they're widening the safety net around them, the installation of CCT cameras, kids being told about stranger danger today, which again, according to David Brooks, is an example that parents have not let kids be on their own. Now, while Postman has experience of face criticism, at the same time, Postman has some support too. So there's this relatively newer study that was conducted in Australia. This study was conducted by Hinckley et al. In the year 2014. And this study found that young children who spend hours each day in front of the television or playing computer games are more likely to suffer from a range of emotional problems and to be overweight. Now, this is Hinckley. Let me put up another color over here. Postman was supported by Trina Hinckley et al. in the year 2014. And according to Hinckley et al., they found that young children who spend hours each day in front of the television or playing computer games are more likely to suffer from a range of different problems, which include being overweight as well. So now we're done with the two approaches. The first one was the conventional approach. The second one we spoke about is the new right approach. Quickly moving on to the third one, that is the social conflict approach to childhood. Now, as we speak about this third approach that we'll be discussing today, that is the social conflict approach to childhood, conflict sociologists could be Marxist sociologists. When we speak about conflict theories, of course, the first thing that comes into our mind is Marxism. So conflict sociologists such as Marxists, they dispute the idea that children's lives have improved. Now, if you recall, if you recall what the March of Progress was about, according to the March of Progress, the experiences children have today are way better than the experiences they had back in the past. However, if we speak about this conflict approach, according to this conflict approach to childhood, they believe that, or rather say, they dispute the idea that children's lives have improved today as compared to the past. Now, what are the two major justifications that they provide to support their idea? According to this conflict approach, inequalities that were based on social class and ethnicity still exist between children. The inequality that kids used to face back in the past, be it in terms of the social class differences, be in terms of ethnicity, according to the conflict sociologists, they believe that these inequalities still persist today, and these inequalities that these kids experience, or rather say the differences, or rather say the qualitative experiences of childhood being different, they consequently affect their future life opportunities as well. So within more industrialized societies such as the US and Britain, there are clear-cut differences in childhood experiences, and they are the result of socioeconomic differences, gender differences, and ethnic inequalities. So, the first point, inequalities based on social class and ethnicity still exist. And if they're still existing, that automatically makes the qualitative experience of childhood different if you compare a childhood from a lower social strata as compared to a child from a upper social class or a upper social strata. Now, how that's the first point. If you talk about the second point over here, there are also major inequalities of power between children and adults. Now, age patriarchy, that is inequalities of power between the children and adults. This point. So the word I used over here was age patriarchy. What does this word age patriarchy over here mean? As we use the word age patriarchy, it is a system of inequalities caused primarily by age differences, and especially the idea that adults, particularly in the heads of household, know what is best for children. So the idea that you as an individual, you as a human being, you're merely experiencing inequality because of your age. Just because you're younger, people tell you what to do, what not to do. The differences in terms of power that is there between a child and an adult, and the idea that because of this age difference, parents could be adults or could even be the head of a household, knows what is best for a child and expects the child to do what he or she is told to do. So, to begin with, if we speak about the differences in terms of social class over here, or if we speak about social class as a factor that affects the experiences of children in the family. Now, as we speak about social class being a factor, I'm sure you would understand this better because by now it is expected of you to know the Marxist perspective otherwise, and the Marxist perspective on the family really well as well. As really well too. So, Marxist sociologists have clearly drawn attention to the fact that childhood is not a universally positive experience, or childhood is not universally positive for all children across the globe. And we over here talking about inequalities in family life. We're talking about inequalities in family income. We're talking about inequalities in terms of housing arrangement, the life chances, and the standard of living caused by the organization of the capitalist system. So, according to the Marxist sociologists, so according to Marxists, there are inequalities in family life. Children globally do not have a positive experience when it comes to their childhood. Of course, we're talking about how the children from the middle class and the upper class families, they're qualitatively in an advantageous position when they're born into affluent families, when they're born into wealthy families, or when they're born into families that are headed by professionals, compared to children who have been born into families that have parents who have low paid work and they've experienced poverty. So, taking this ahead, if we speak about how the children from the elite families or the richer classes or the higher socioeconomic status, they get an option or they have the privilege to go to private schools or prestigious boarding schools, higher status universities. And of course, this gives them an upper hand. This gives them an opportunity to this provides them with an opportunity, or this leads to them having higher life chances ahead as they grow older. Likewise, if we talk about children from the middle class families, middle class families, they say parents are more engaged in concerted cultivation of children. Now, what does this mean when we use the word concerted cultivation of children? Now, as we use the word concerted cultivation of children, the idea over here is that this is a type of a middle class socialization of children which aims to develop or encourage cultural behavior and knowledge such as knowledge of art, history, literature, and so on, which may be advantageous in educational context. So the word we're using over here is concerted cultivation. I'll just put this in a box over here. The idea that when a middle class child is being socialized, or as a middle class child is being socialized, a middle class child is socialized in a manner that he is or she is made to engage with a range of specific cultural, artistic, and sporting activities, which of course helps the child have an upper edge over the children from the working class background. These parents, they help they make the children get have what do you call it, library memberships. They make their children, or they encourage the child to visit museums, to visit art galleries and sites of historical interest, which is, in other words, nothing less than cultivation of children dominated by the middle class family. And this is something that is not only costly but at the same time labor intensive too. And when we use the word labor intensive over here, of course, this requires a lot of dedication. This is quite an effort that is put forward by middle class parents typically. Now, if I take this ahead, there was a study of middle class childhood by Carol Vincent and Stephen Ball in the year 2007, and they found that middle class parents raise Renaissance children. Middle class parents, this was the study that they conducted in the year. So, this study that was conducted in the year 2007, and this study was conducted by Vincent and Stephen Ball. The year is 2007. They found that middle class parents raise Renaissance children. Now, what does the word Renaissance children over here mean? The idea that middle class children possess a lot of cultural capitals, that is, knowledge valued by schools and universities. So, middle class children possess lots of cultural capital, that is, knowledge valued by schools and universities. Whereas, on the other hand, if we speak about the experiences of children from the working class background, if we speak about children and the experiences, children from the working class background, they are left to acquire knowledge, understanding of the wider world on their own. So, working class childhood may be made more difficult by the experience of childhood. The emphasis over here is on how working class children learn things or adapt to things on their own. Taking this ahead, according to Lotto, who found that working class parents emphasized the natural growth of their children. They did not develop their children's special talents. Instead, they believed that as long as they provided their children with love, food, and safety, their children would grow up to be healthy, well rounded individuals. Taking this ahead, if we speak about the study that was conducted by Barbara Jeffries et al. In the year 2002, she found that children who experienced poverty had significantly fallen behind children from middle class backgrounds in terms of maths, reading, and other ability tests by the age of 7. So, a study that was conducted by Jeffries et al. In the year 2002, the idea is that if you talk about a comparison between children from the working class background with the children from the middle class background, this study that was conducted in 2002 found that children lacked lacked in terms of ability when it came to math and reading. Number two, poverty increases risk of illness during childhood, which is again a point that we cannot miss out. Number three, And the more ill a child is, the more they'd have to miss school, and the more they miss school, the more chances there are that they would eventually not do well in their examinations and be left behind if you compare them with children from the working class, from the middle class or the upper class background. The third point, children miss out on childhood activities. What sort of childhood activities are we talking about? Participation in different events that many children from the middle class and the upper class take for granted. For instance, school trips, inviting friends around for dinner or for lunch, or spending holidays away from home, because the children from the working class background, they cannot really afford them. Moving on to the next factor, we'd speak about how ethnicity is a factor that affects experience of children in the family. And if we speak about ethnic differences over here. So ethnic differences again are more evident when you talk about multicultural countries, and when you talk about countries that have people from different ethnic origins that are living there. This it has been seen that these countries that I mean, it has been seen that along with these ethnic differences, hand in hand come the social class differences as well, and at the same time religious differences too. So, according to this research that was conducted by Paul A. Singh Guman in the year 2003, he found that religion had a significant impact on the childhood experience of Asians in Britain. For example, many Muslim children spent some of their week at a mosque or madrasa learning the Quran. So, according to this study that was conducted by Guman in the year 2003, here you go. Religions distinctly impact childhood experiences. Guman claims generational there could be a generational conflict. Asian parents, children in Western societies are likely to be provoked by children. So if I take this a little further, Guman argued that generational conflict between Asian parents and children living in the Western societies, we're talking about generational conflict over here, was likely to emerge as children come into contact with Western institutions and peers. And this potential conflict was likely to be provoked by children, especially female children, over issues such as westernized dress, the dating of boys, arranged marriages, and the aspirations of girls with regard to higher education and future working careers. Guman cites increasing evidence that Muslim girls living in the Western societies had expectations that went beyond the traditional pathways and cultural beliefs that stress motherhood and domesticity. Now, this, according to Guman, could be quite problematic. Likewise, there was this another study that was conducted by Charlotte Butler in the year 1995. According to Butler, a study of Muslim girls in Britain found that they respected both the teachings of Islam and the wishes of their parent, and that they preferred to resolve any potential conflict through compromise. So, this is, if I talk about the study that was conducted by Butler, I'll just add it up over here. Butler in the year 1995. Charlotte Butler, she conducted a research on Muslim girls, and she claimed that she found that the teachings of Islam and the wishes of their parents, they were both Muslim girls respected religious teachings as well as parents' wishes. And if there was any potential conflict, it was resolved by by the girls, or in a manner that the girls eventually ended up compromising. Taking this ahead, if we speak about this idea of age patriarchy, as we speak about this idea of age patriarchy today, let me put this in a box. Here you go. So we're talking about age patriarchy now. As we talk about age patriarchy, What is age patriarchy now? Conflict sociologists argue that many of the things that March of Progress writers see positively as care and protection are, in fact, new forms of oppression and control by adults. So, conflict sociologists are again criticizing the March of Progress approach by claiming that the things that were seen by writers or sociologists from the March of Progress uh, school of thought domain, the things that they saw positively as care and protection, they are in fact a new form of oppression and control by adults. The adult or parental control, which is known as age patriarchy, takes a number of different forms. Now, number one, if we speak about children's controlling children over their space, controls over children's space, this could be in terms of road safety, in terms of stranger danger. Likewise, if we speak about control over children's times, children you see today have a uh, children have a daily routine. Parents judge what behavior is appropriate or inappropriate for the children. If they consider the children's behavior to be inappropriate, the child may be punished by being sent to sit on the naughty step, or by being banished to their room. Again, if they're teenagers, they may be grounded. What you all know what grounded is, and in some countries they legitimately be physically beaten up as well. So there is more of control over children's space today. There's more of control over children's time today. There's more of control over children's behavior today. And about time, I give you an example as to how children are expected to have a daily routine, which includes getting up, going to school, coming home, going to play, watching television, and then sleeping. And adults also control the speed at which children grow up as well. They would decide whether a child is too old, too young for this or that activity, responsibility, or behavior, so on and so forth. Likewise, according to this idea of age patriarchy, children today, or parents today, or adults today, they try to control over children's bodies as well. For instance, adults exercise enormous amount of control. They exercise enormous amount of control when it comes to children when it comes to how children are expected to sit, how they're expected to walk, how they're expected to run, how they're expected to, what they're expected to wear, when they should be wearing makeup, or if they should be allowed to wear makeup or not, them wearing glasses and so on, their hairstyles, whether or not they can have their ears pierced. It is taken for granted that children's bodies may be touched in certain ways by certain adults. They're washed, fed, and dressed, have their heads patted and hands held and picked up, cuddled, and kissed. At the same time, adults restrict the ways in which children may touch their own bodies. For example, a child may be told not to pick their nose, not to suck their thumb, or to play with their genitals. Now, we are the idea over here is age patriarchy. I mean, sociology is subject. The more you read, the better you keep on getting at it. But I think these 4 points that we put up over here pretty much explain, and you can all elaborate them on your own. So there are four different ways through which conflict sociologists believe children experience age patriarchy today, such as control over the children's space, their time, their behavior, as well as their bodies. Now, taking this a little further, if we move on and we speak about a feminist approach, if we speak about the feminist approach to childhood, gender, gender is seen as a factor that affects experiences of children within a family as well. And as we speak about the feminist approach, as we speak about the feminist approach to childhood, we cannot ignore Anne Oakley, we cannot ignore Sue Sharp, we cannot ignore Fine. Sharp in the year 1976, Sue Sharp in the year 1976, Anne Oakley in the year 1985, Fine in the year 2011. They show that boys and girls in more industrialized societies such as the US and Britain are socialized into a set of behaviors based on their cultural expectations about masculinity and femininity, which as a consequence, or we could say consequently, girls have a qualitatively different experience of childhood compared with boys in terms of the toys they're given, the nature of the play activities, the chores they do around the home, and their interaction with their parents and relatives compared to boys. So, this gendered socialization, according to feminist analysis, is mainly aimed at them learning the feminine skills and attitudes needed to perform the adult roles of them being a homemaker and a mother in the future. So, taking this a little further from here, according to Oakley, Fine, and Sharp, Children today are socialized based on cultural expectations. Children today are socialized based on cultural expectations about masculinity and femininity, which you'd all know is referred to as gendered socialization. If I take this ahead, girls experience a more protected childhood, protection from the outside world. They have stricter social controls. Boys today are toned down, they're emotionally toned down. And for instance, the study that was conducted by Chapman in the year 2004, Chapman calls toning down their emotionality and familial intimacy so that they effectively require the masculine skills and attitudes that are required for the adult role as a wage worker or a breadwinner in the future. So, this again explains it pretty much all, how girls experience a more protected childhood, how boys' emotional side is being toned down. If there's a family that has a limited budget, they're more likely to invest in the development of their sons as compared to the daughter. Females, at the same time, we cannot ignore, are if you talk about females, they're at a greater risk of sexual violence and abuse. There's even to this date, there are so many children who experience neglect and physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. There's a negative effect of divorce, on parental divorce, on children as well. So the points that I'm trying to explain, the point that I'm trying to explain over here is, now taking this a little further, there was this study that was conducted by William Corsara in the year 2011. And according to Corsaro in the year 2011, Corsaro is critical of gender role socialization argument. He argues that there's little research on parent-child interaction in the home, and there's no real and convincing evidence and analysis of how toys are used or symbolically valued. He argues that much of the sociological research on play gendered play that does exist assumes rather than proves that playing with female toys such as dolls lead to a gendered experience of childhood or outcomes such as mother or breadwinner. He argues that no sociological research has established such a link for certain. Now, Corsaro, you see how he is not convinced with the idea that just because a child is made to play with a particular type of toy would eventually result in the joy that would eventually result in a child's uh, childhood experience being gendered. So, taking this ahead, we had spoken about child abuse as well. Uh, there are numerous examples when where there are numerous examples that we could discuss when it comes to how children today are experiencing neglect and physical, sexual, as well as emotional abuse. If we speak about uh, the different types of abuse, if we speak about the different types of abuse over here, yeah, so if we speak about different types of abuse over here, there are different types of child abuse that have been rediscovered in recent years in Western societies, such as, like I said, neglect and physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. In Britain, for example, there are 30,000 children that are on child protection registers because they're at risk of abuse from family members. Now, the number 30,000 is a huge number. It is a fact then that not all children experience their childhood as happy, positive, secure, and safe. For many children and teenagers, childhood is an exploitative, abusive, and sometimes very dangerous experience. There are numerous researches. There was a study there was a global survey in the year 2011 of child sexual abuse, which estimated that for every 1,000 children in the world, 118 had been the victim of sexual violence. Most of these victims were females. The rates of abuse were found to be particularly high in parts of Africa and Asia. Western girls were more confident in talking about their experience about abuse because the cultural environment in which they were located that was more supportive. Likewise, there are numerous statistics. We have some statistics that were revealed, or sorry, that were released by the Indian government, and these statistics from 2017, they indicate that a child is sexually abused every 15 minutes, was sexually abused in every 15 minutes in 2016, and there were over 100,000 cases that were officially recorded. Likewise, if we talk about studies from many African societies, in some African societies such as Zimbabwe and Zambia, young girls were considered less likely to have HIV and therefore were preferred as sexual partners. There was this another study. I mean, there are numerous studies. If we just talk about the study that was conducted by Catherine Bagaya in 2010. She argues that the socialization of African children to unquestioningly obey older people puts them at a higher risk always. Now, these are a couple of examples that we could use while we're writing down our answers. Now, taking this a little further, if we move on and we speak about the social action approach over here. What exactly is this social action approach? This is also referred to as the interactionist approach. So, according to the social action approach or the interactionist approach to childhood, the conventional march of progress approach has been criticized by social action sociologists who have focused on researching how children see and interpret the world around them. Remember, the idea is interactionism. The school of thought that we moved on towards is the interactionist perspective. And according to this interactionist perspective, individuals do not play a passive role. They play an active role within the society. And of course, in line with that, the focus over here by the interactionist approach is on researching how children see and interpret the world around them and how children's decisions and social actions can help to bring about social change in the role and social position of children in the family. The social action approaches to childhood, they suggest that functionist and new right arguments wrongly assume that children are simply empty vessels waiting to be passively filled with values, parental wisdom, and appropriate behavior. According to the social action approach, family life is presented by the functionist as well as the new right argument or approach as a one-way process in which parents socialize their children, and the idea is to transform their children into good citizens. However, in contrary, if we speak about the social action approach or the interactionist approach over here, they argue that socialization actually is a two-way process in which the children are actively engaged in the social construction of both parenthood and childhood. In other words, parents learn as much from their children as children do from their adults. There are three big themes in the interactionist or social action approach to childhood and family. Now, the first theme that I'd like to bring in under discussion over here. The social action theory, they criticize the conventional view of childhood for ignoring the idea that children develop their own unique interpretation of family life, which they actively employ when they socially interact with their parents, siblings, and other family members. In other words, children are social actors who actively contribute to the social construction of their childhood. According to this study that was conducted by Morrow in the year 1998, so this study that was conducted by Morrow in the year 1998, Virginia Morrow found that children can be constructive and reflective contributors to family life. Most of the children in Morrow's study had a pragmatic view of their family role. They did not want to make decisions for themselves, but they did want a say in what happened to them. So when we say children had a more constructive and reflective contribution to family life, what we actually mean is what Morrow in the year what Virginia Morrow in the year 1998 believes in is that Children did not want to make decisions for themselves, but they did want a say in what happened to them. Likewise, if we take this ahead, we could speak about this the second theme that the interactionist approach believes, that children should have the right to make an active contribution to both their childhood and family life in general. Children should have the right to make an active contribution to both their childhood and family in general. According to Valentine in the year 1999, Valentine argues that children and adults often fight over the right to independence. Children and adults, they often fight over the right to independence. Valentine in the year 1999. The idea that children and adults often fight over the right to independence. She notes that children can influence the process of acquiring this right by behaving in particular way. It is the job of parents to make judgments about how much freedom to grant and whether children can master the skills required to survive independently in the outside world. Children may learn how to manipulate their parents' judgment, or they may convince one parent that they're competent and responsible in order to secure the right to more independence and freedom. Taking this ahead from here, the third stance or the third theme, social action theory points that age is highly contested in most households. Both the child and parent insist that the child is old enough to do one thing but young to do something else. The idea that age is highly contested in most households. There are three different themes that we had referred to: the first one, the second one, the third one. I'd like to put it like this from here. Age is highly contested in most households. When I say age is mostly contested in most households, the idea over here is that both the child and parent, they insist that the child is old enough to do one thing but too young to do something else. There are also gendered assumptions about what children can do. Girls may be regarded as more mature than boys, but also in need of more adult protection. So they could be, again, if we take this a little further, we could speak about how childhood, according to the social action approach, is or should not be seen as a static and universal experience, because children contest in every step of this way. They generally want more rights as they grow older. However, social action theory acknowledges that this can lead to tension and conflict within the society. And this tension and conflict between the state trying to protect children and children wanting more of rights of independence. There could be tension between parents protecting children from external threat and children being active agents of their own behavior. According to Chambers argues that legislation passed by government in many countries to protect children often does not transmit a consistent image of the rational, independent, self-directed child. These legislations, they assume that children should never be given the power or freedom to decide how they should behave in particular situations. In other words, the notion that children can be totally free to make their own decisions must be illusory. So according to Chambers, there could be tension between parents and children that could be there could be tension between parents and children, which is caused by children using more of media. So the more media children consume, the more problems there could be, according to Chambers. Like I said, Chambers identifies a tension between parents and children caused by children's use of the new media, digital media. She notes that since 2000s, there has been a revolution in the range of new media gadgets, especially smartphones being used in the family home, and that this has prompted a renegotiation of relationships between children and parent. And we've all seen how even toddlers, they get their way through by having parents to give in to the idea of them using gadgets. Now, quickly moving on to the last approach, to the last perspective, because before we end this lesson, we're talking about the postmodernist approach to childhood. And according to this postmodernist approach to childhood, there are a number of themes that postmodernists have highlighted, which have a significant effect on the experience of childhood. Postmodern theory suggests that the status of children may be changing because of the emergence of new kinds of intimate relationships and new versions of the family. If we talk about the first point, according to the first point, there's a changing status of children today. According to Anthony Giddens in the year 1991, he argues that there's been a transformation in the nature of family life that has led to the emergence of more democratic relationships in the families. Democratic relationships, how children are now gaining the right to determine and regulate their association with parents. Chambers argues, wait, we spoke about Giddens for now, because there are newer versions of family today. He argues that the experience of children in gay and lesbian households, of children who have experienced their parents' divorce, co-parenting, and even binuclear families, children who live in single-parent families and reconstituted or step-parent families, children who have to care for adults and so on, cannot directly be compared with children who lived in a conventional two-parent family. So new versions of family, because there's more of family diversity. And this, you cannot compare. There's no comparison. Hence, there's no comparison with nuclear or children being raised in nuclear families. So, taking this ahead, according to the postmodernist perspective, childhood is undergoing a process of individualism. Children are becoming more autonomous of their parents, and they're increasingly exercising influence of their family's economic consumption as well. Children have become autonomous of their parents. Not only that, they're increasingly exercising influence of their family's economic consumption. This individualization may mean that in the future, the growing autonomy of children may mean that families may experience difficulties in fitting children into society, and that more social problems involving children are likely to appear in the future. You could also speak about the idea of pester power over here. For the ones who know, they know. For the ones who don't, pester power is the ability of children to pressurize their parents into buying their products, especially items that they see on the media. So this is something, a point that you could raise as well. Likewise, children are we could also speak about how people talk about we could also speak about how people talk about the golden age of childhood, a golden age that everyone talks about. Every parent, you'd see how they try to tell you about how about their childhood was amazing, but probably when they were younger, they had to hear the same from their own parents as well. Likewise, children today are seen as a symbol of conspicuous consumption. What is conspicuous consumption? The idea is when you spend to show. When you talk about conspicuous consumption, the idea is kids today or parents today, they spend money, or rather say expenditure is done, or things are consumed in a luxurious or lavish scale in an attempt to enhance one's prestige. To put it in a simple manner, when people spend to show. So there are numerous references that you could put to use over here as well. Of course, the appearance of new forms of media, gadgets today. There are gadgets today. There are younger kids wanting gadgets of their own. Younger kids wanting what do you call it? Their own personal space. If we speak about the study that was conducted by Sonia Livingstone in the year 2009, she notes that the rise of youth-centered media and screen-rich bedroom culture has led to many parents believing that a very important part of a good childhood is that children should have the right to their own personal space, that is their own bedroom in the family household, which again leads to children using more of children having more of screen time. Livingstone notes that children communicate more with the virtual outside world than with adult members of their own family. Parents often have to text or Facebook their children to gain their attention at mealtime, which is sad. Likewise, there's this another study from the year 2001, and this study that was conducted by Rompe and Rowe in the year 2001 argued that children's active use of new media has led to a new type of family interaction, which they call living together but separately. Living together but separately. Of course, if a parent has to text a child for the child to come to have the meal, you're living together but you're not living together. So this could go on and on and on. If I sum this up, the postmodernist perspective argue that we need to examine how contemporary processes such as individualization, processes such as family diversity, digital media saturation, consumption, patterns and globalization, they're impacting on childhood. And in a nutshell, more of technological advancement, more of choices that children have today, more so according to the postmodernist perspective, just because not every child has the same experience, we cannot and should not be very judgmental. So we have this question: evaluate the view that in contemporary society the family has become child-centered. I'm just showing you these questions. Of course, because of lack of time, I cannot be discussing them right now. There's this another 4-mark question that says describe 2 social policies that restrict the behavior of children. We had this question in March 2021. There's this third question over here that says that we had in October, November 2021. The question reads, gender is the most important factor affecting the experience of children in the family. This is a 10-mark question for, of course, uh, the first part, that is part A, you'd be expected to write down in support, and of course then you'd have to attempt the B part as well, where you're expected to give one sociological argument against the idea. So the idea over here is to show you the question so that you can all go through this. I hope this lesson has been helpful. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.